all around the world. Oh, and I have a new microphone. It's big. It's supposed to knock out the echo off the floor. We'll see. Okay, a couple things. Go ahead and take out the notes from chapters 1 and 2, and I will collect that. And let me do the names again. I know I'm gonna. If I mess something up, please let me know. So Laney is here. Tyler is going back there. Caden. And we have a couple Tylers, and I'm glad you're sitting right next to each other. That'll make it so much easier. And I did that. That was my thinking. Ryan, Ella? Yep, we got it. And she might be going to digital now. Adam, very good. Lillian, Carlin, and Josh. Very good. We got it. And I'm recognizing eyes slowly but surely. Okay, I also pick up the Zen assignment that was due. Chapter 2, you had a few questions. Yeah.
Turn that in online. You want me to just pull it up?
If you turn it online, I'll take it online. Just remind me and I'll try to grade it. It's a little bit easier for me to keep track of everything if you turn it in class, just because. But if you turn it online, just let me know.
Okay.
The problem is, we start getting into more the A day, B day, and a lot of people going digital. We might have to go more to turning it online. If I decide that, I'll let you know.
Okay.
The big thing is, if I miss it online, let me know and I'll get it. So I'm going through and I'm grading stuff now. I think the classes are pretty much set, so I'm going to start recording grades and getting them in. I don't like doing it till I know, because I've had people bounce around, move around, things like that. And so it's always that kind of weak period, even though this seems, it's going to be very odd. And I'm going to mess things up with A day, B day, and just, that's why I give the grace period for turning late. We're all going to be messed up. By the way, did you watch classes? I know it's a lot harder watching them online, but you don't get the same, but you're responsible for everything I did in there. And I'm going to just kind of, relatively randomly, but I'm going to collect notes. Just have you take a picture, and that one I'll have you turn it on and make a PDF. I just, to reward you for doing it. It's just something to just keep people focused. It's a lot better here, I know that, even with the mask. By the way, it's not too cold in here today, is it? You should have been here Tuesday. They were all crying. Yeah, I was a little cold too. My new mic and nose ear purifier. I'm still pointing that out. It's going to keep us all so healthy. You know, I don't know. All right, I'm going to do something really quick. I'm checking my phone just to make sure it's broadcasting. I always got to do that. Because sometimes the YouTube doesn't broadcast. It doesn't appear to be broadcasting. We're broadcasting. Okay. Any questions on the notes? So we got them all. And I'm just going to do a quick check. What I do on these, I don't give a lot of notes like this, but when I do give notes, I'm going to do a quick. I just do a quick check certain ones. I think I'm a little more complex. I'm not going to grade through every one. The big thing is if I know you have it, then I can give it back to you so you have the material. I'm rewarding you for reading it and doing the summer assignment. And so I will, and then Zen. So what happened with Zen? Had to be on a separate sheet. Yeah. I'm old and I can't read it when you scroll, when people put it in there. So you got, I won't mark it late, but get it to me when it's on a separate sheet, okay? Anybody else got Zen? Yes, yes. Okay, first off, give me your note packets. You're doing all. Yeah, just remind me. I'll click that first. Well, actually, give me the, give me Zen too. I will separate. Should I do that? Yeah. Roll pro. No, that didn't. Oh yeah, give me that one. Got it. How do we do this?
And then mine's in sorry about that.
Say it again.
Mine's in my notes are at my place in my dash, so I'll bring them all out.
Okay.
Apologies.
Then and no notes. Oh, you put them. You gave me.
Oh, I highlighted stuff.
That's perfectly fine. I'll give it back.
Okay.
Because my original plan was to give you a test, but we got to move on. We are doing it. Huh?
I'm ready to go in there. Sorry, that was small. It was fine.
No, that's fine. The notes are for you. And I know everyone has their own shorthand. I mean, I shouldn't be able to understand all your notes.
Okay.
You ever try to get notes from somebody else and you have no idea what they're writing? That's probably a good thing. Because that means, you know, that they're.
I scan online.
Put 'em-
Where we at?
There we go. So, and that's the other thing too. I don't want, I put in all the grades in for all the classes together with 8A, B, I have the 8A graded. Get this, I'll get them in. So by Monday we'll start getting grades in and we'll start keeping, I think that's, okay, so, yeah, I thought Zen, I like Zen because it sets up what we're talking about right now. Because this is a biggie, and so my expectation is you watch the classes, and I know it's harder when you're not here, but you know about, for example, what crop did John Rolfe grow? Tobacco. Is that addictive drug? Yes. Not quite yet, but that will be another addictive drug down the road. Well, actually, it was already here, but not in Virginia. And what were those colonies called? Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. The waterway, or the bay that's right there. Yeah, yeah. The Chesapeake colony, and you might see, I just give them a name, and the big reason is that's become something they'll put in the College Board. If we have the regular AP exam, there might be multiple choice questions or what are called short answer questions, and we'll go through all that, and if you've taken AP before, you know what I'm talking about, or at least have an idea. And I'm trying to think, what else? What else do we do? Who are you people? What was the tribe they had the wars with? The colonists did. The tribe that was trying to defend their land. The P something, exact. Powhats. And how did they win? How did they win the war? What did they give them? What's that?
Was it the
Wine. Wine fortified with poison. Yeah, they killed them. They murdered them. They cheated. They justified it because we're the good guys. Yes. By the way, always be okay for all of you. And YouTube works a lot better. Oh! What disease were Africans a little bit more resistant to? Hmm? Yeah, malaria. So, does this look pretty familiar to where we put, when you were here, we had 1619, do we see this? Do you guys got this? The first slaves, do we get, so we had all kinds of servants in the lower class, and slavery, all of it had nothing to do with color of skin. Nothing to do. It was religion, bad luck, most of the servants, and most of the African slaves were actually debtors, who assumed that they're working off their debt, and they were sold into slavery, which I can't even imagine the hell of that. Yes. Yeah, now it's time to take notes. I should have said something. And did everyone get the most slaves were treated like indentured servants? Did you get that from your note? Yeah. Did we get this? This is familiar to you. I know, I'm all messed up A day, B day, and I'm always a little bit off in periods, so I'm never exactly sure. So when I do this every B day, just have sympathy with me. I have sympathy with you, because this is tough. And then I'm going to be alone on next Wednesday. That's going to be weird. I have one cardboard cutout. Everyone bring a cardboard cutout tomorrow, so I'll put it. Won't that be cool?
Oh, damn it.
Just bring stuff in.
What?
Just talk to some animals.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, look at that.
So, why Africans? Things we talk about here, the distance, disease. And don't forget, slavery was very expensive. And if slavery was very expensive, they didn't want them to run away. You might think slavery is free labor. It's not free labor. It's more complex than that. But you can make slaves do things that people would not do for a wage. By the way, when I say wage, don't think in terms of today. The economy today is nothing like the economy then. We will talk about what capitalism is. I say the term, have an idea, but I'll go over it. This is pre-capitalism. This is pre-wage system. The world would not make sense to us. So when I say working for a wage, I'm just being generic. It was different then. And they're not citizens. Citizens don't have expectation of liberty or rights like indentured servants. By the way, what was that little piece of land that indentured servants got? What was it called? The name of it? Maybe a little else, but that little piece of land.
Is it a head right?
Exactly, a head right. Oh, you said, I'm sorry. I know, I can't hear mouth. I can't hear mouth. That's weird.
Your mouth.
So I can't see mouth, so I have to kind of. And I sympathize with the water. You have day drink. These things dry your throat so bad, don't they? You're fine, aren't you? You're just looking at me like, yeah, shut up, quit whining. Who's thinking that right now? Quit whining. All of you. Okay. So, they're not English citizens, though. They don't have that indenture. They don't have that contract. They don't demand rights. And I can't emphasize enough how much that contract meant. I can't emphasize that enough. Colonists had, English indentured servants had that contract, had that little piece of paper. They were a citizen. Slaves were treated like indentured servants too, but it was unclear when they would be free. It was more just a deal they made. Hey, don't run away for 5 years and we'll give you your freedom. And children of slaves, they were technically free. It was really complex. There were no set rules. The Spaniards were developing some rules in their colonies, but the sugar plantations, and I'm not exaggerating, literally just chewed up human beings. They died. They almost all died. It was hell on earth, those sugar plantations. And so they had a different way of looking at it. So Bacon's Rebellion. Let's get to this. Bacon's Rebellion is a huge event. I think this is right where I got it. Oh, perfect. So Bacon's Rebellion. They're moving westward. There's war with the Powhatans the whole time. Head rights. And I think I got right to this at the end of the period, didn't I? Yeah, what land did they get? Well, they were getting, how long did it take for tobacco, especially the way they produced it then, to leach out the soil? How long did it take for tobacco cultivation to leach out the soil, so the soil became worthless? About 3 years. Then what do you do with that wasted land? They gave it to the indentured servants. Think about it. They've gone through 7 years of absolute hell. Of hell. And then they get bad land. Or they put them way out in the frontier. So here, this yellow was settled land by the colonists in 1650. They put them out here. They put them on the edges here. Who's going to be attacked by the American Indians? Yeah. So you have the double whammy. And so they're poor, they have nothing, but finally I'm free. That little bit of liberty. And next thing you know, They're either in debt because they can't make money and they lose it, and they become, oh yeah, they might, or sell their children indentureship, which is horrible, but that happened. Or become kind of a wage laborer, but working for almost nothing, just barely surviving, more like a serf. It was really hard. Or they're the ones being killed on the frontier by American Indians who rightfully and deftly trying to defend their land because they could see the future. They just never dreamed of what it would actually be. But they would try to complain. And remember the House of Burgesses I said yesterday? That representative body, they had no representation. It was only made up of the elite. They had no representation. Who do they complain to? And this is working out pretty well for the elite. They're being killed along the frontier. They barely make a living. And then, when the Indian threat is removed, they come in and swallow up that land. It's working out great for them. It's a scam. The game is rigged. And that is going to lead to a rebellion. And it's going to be led by Nathaniel Bacon. He was in the Burgesses. But he was on the frontier, and, excuse me, I'm sorry. He blamed Governor William Berkeley, who by then was a royal governor, and even though it was the Burgesses who did it, he blamed Berkeley. And so he was going to march on Jamestown. So here's where Bacon's plantation was. Here's where the rebellion began, and they're going to march on Jamestown. Now, I know it almost seems like a short distance, but remember, virtually no roads, going through swamp. It's a long ways. And this is going to cause absolute panic. Their big argument for Bacon, though, was protection from attacks along the frontier. Bacon is saying, we're being attacked and we want militia. Militia are, another way to think about them, are citizen soldiers. They are people who are farmers or laborers, artisans, whatever it might be, but once a month or something they train or drill for kind of an emergency armed forces. They're not very well trained. They're not very effective against a regular army, but protection from attack, or the biggie, slave rebellion. We'll talk about that. The closest example is, and it's mandated by the Constitution, there has to be trained militias, and that's the National Guard. The National Guard is our militia. And when Bacon started, all members of the lower class joined. All joined. And it wasn't his plan, but we had the poor farmers, we had the laborers. Just a sec. Okay. Indentured servants and slaves. And what held them together was they were all members of this exploited lower class. And one thing very important, this included, before the term was even invented, all races. Because slaves, there were slaves of European descent, North African descent, Sub-Saharan Africans, American Indian slaves from all the way from Newfoundland all the way down to Brazil that were taken and enslaved. This is just a hodgepodge of different peoples. You know, color of skin has, there's no genetic difference. It was just, and in fact, it wasn't that big of a deal. The term race is coming. This is a class rebellion. It didn't start out that way. And that wasn't Bacon's plan. But this is the poor, working people angry at the elite who are rigging the system against them. And I should add, who's in the majority? Yes, about 99 to 1. And so these are and there's basically only farmers and a few artisans, skilled craftsmen, and that's it. And so with that, Jamestown sent out the militia. So they ordered the militia out. But here's the thing. What class were most of the militiamen in? Yeah. What did they do? They joined. When the militia joined, that blew everything up. This would happen a number of times. Most famously in 1787, something called Shays' Rebellion. And there was a revolution that happened in 1877 called the Great Upheaval in the U.S. But the militia joined. And when they joined, they began to march on Jamestown. I mean, it blew up. The people, the Burgesses there panicked. They ran away. They went and they burned Jamestown. They didn't burn the whole town down, but this is a very stylized picture. This is done years afterwards of burning down Jamestown. But it was fall of 1676. Fall. What do farmers have to do? A lot of them went home for the harvest, and then winter hit, and Bacon died of dysentery. You know what dysentery is? Maybe dysentery is,
It's not what you get from water.
yeah, it's usually from water, tainted water, and it's the worst symptom, the chronic diarrhea, and you dehydrate and die. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific.
My grandpa had it.
Oh,
He would always drink from like creeks when he was hunting.
Oh, so you mean like the one from mammals, like
yeah,
feces?
yeah, it's from feces, yeah. It's in amoebas, yeah. And you don't know, it's, well, I guess it's just, I guess it hurts so bad, it's hard to describe. Okay, moving away from that fun, I was just thinking about that in Western Cinema, I'm talking about the Battle of Agincourt when the entire British Army had dysentery. I won't tell you that story before lunch. Okay, moving on. And then the Royal Navy, a few British ships arrived, they kind of tricked the rebellion. The big thing is the rebellion was put down. But this set panic throughout Virginia, and the panic would go throughout the other colonies like Massachusetts that were just starting, and amongst the elite. When I mean elite, I mean the planters. That's the elite. What if this happens again? We're outnumbered. The militia joined. This could happen again. And this is a big deal. A similar thing's going to happen in 1787 called Shays' Rebellion. That's going to lead to a strong central government in the United States called the Constitution. So this is not an unusual thing. But the Burgesses' question, and it's a biggie, how do we keep control? They're outnumbered, they know it. I should ask, what are the two things they want? The members of the House of Burgesses. They want what? Two things. What's one? They want to keep their flow of money, don't they? They don't want that to end. I mean, if they have to get better protection and better land, that's their money. And what's the other thing? They want to stay on top. And who else do they want to stay on top? Their children. And so on and so on. And people like them. And so this is actually Bacon. That's supposed to be Bacon in front of the House of Burgesses saying, you got to do something. Who knows what would happen if Bacon wouldn't have died of dysentery? It really is one of the great what-ifs in history. So, if they're outnumbered, they can't unify. So for the House of Burgesses, they're looking, we got to make sure that indentured servants and poor working people and all the different forms of slavery, all the slaves, they don't unify. They don't unify. How do we do that? They have to find something to drive a wedge between them and keep power. And I can't emphasize that enough. All of this is to keep power. To keep power. So what do? Slave codes. That's why I had you read chapter 2 as in. The slave codes. And the first slave codes start in the 1660s. But when they became enforced, mandated, strengthened, was because of Bacon's rebellion. And every other colony, every other one would follow, because there are slaves everywhere. and all the British colonies would follow afterwards. And these slave codes would change the way people thought about slavery and thought about all of it, because it only applied to slaves, because they didn't have a contract. They didn't have a contract. They weren't citizens. And so there was no set path for their freedom, and so they could make one up. They have no concept of English rights because they're not citizens. Remember how bad it had to be in England for indentured servants, or for people in England to become indentured servant. But they could always say, I'm a citizen. And now, I gotta be a little better, right? Because I'm a citizen. Actually, they would have said I'm an Englishman. But I just put down citizen so we could understand what that meant. So, slave codes. You know, drink of water. So, not that slaves had rights, but it greatly restricted them. Greatly restricted the rights. And most commonly, particularly the right to trial, right to give testimony, even though slaves could be tried, they couldn't give testimony for themselves. They didn't have rights in it, and to be on a jury. They kept it from assembling, so they couldn't organize a rebellion, limited their speech. And, you have your notes down? Yeah. Have you ever heard that slaves couldn't read or that sort of thing? That was, slaves weren't allowed to read and write and do math. That wouldn't be until the 1830s. And that was to keep them from reading abolitionist material. But the most important was the fornication laws. So that's what I had you had you get this. The fornication laws. I want everyone to take this out really quick. Now there's two fornication laws, and on your own read this, or on your own read the second part. But right now, everybody read Negro women's children. Before you start reading, what's fornication?
Reproduction.
Not always. Sex outside of marriage. Sex outside of marriage. So don't think you'll either. So whatever the condition, the two people having sex are not married. And this is about fornication. This was considered, in fact, they said, if you look right on the second paragraph, for restraint of the filthy sin of fornication. So this is a filthy sin. So whoever's committing it, they're a sinner. And by the way, people don't want to look like a sinner. What do they want to look like? Yeah, a good moral person. It doesn't mean they want to stop doing it. Something else. Read it and think about who's committing fornication. And yes, children might come out of this. Read that. Read Negro women's children. And think about how this might draw a wedge. So read that right now. Huh? Have you read that? Click on. This law will change the world. It will change everything. It's that big of a law. The fornication law was huge. So let's be clear about one thing. First off, who's committing the fornication? What people? What people are committing this? Who is committing fornication in this context? Slaves and the Englishman means who? The master. It's the master. Does that help? It's the master and the slave, meaning who's the male? The master. What's happening here? What are the masters doing? They're raping their slaves. This is rape. And they're raping their slaves. Slaves have no consent. There's no, this is not love. This is rape. So, what's coming out of this rape? Occasionally there's children. Will the children get the inheritance? Will the children get the name? Or what if the master is married and has children? And it'll come out that they're committing the filthy sin of fornication. I think you get the point here. What do masters want? Huh? Say it again?
Power.
Yeah, they want power. To keep doing what? Raping. What do they want? And they want no consequences, do they? Who's writing the law? What kind of people? The masters. They wrote the law so they can keep doing what they're doing. And if the slave admits this, they're whipped. So what do? Keep their mouth shut. What did this do about slaves? So, are the children going to be the master's kids or not? And what decision did they make?
No.
What happens to the children? Yeah.
I was just considered they're not really considered the children of the master.
See, I know the math, sorry.
Oh, I was saying that they're not really considered the children of the masters.
Yeah. And so they'll be the children of the woman. And what will they become then? It will be based upon the condition of servitude of the mother. Wow, what a law, huh? So, not only can the master continue to commit this heinous crime, they profit from it, don't they? They make money. This is unbelievable. You want to talk about a rigged system? Okay, the other laws you have to read, think of it in that context, but now about indentured servants. We'll read that on your own. So let's go ahead and get to this then. So, what have you created? This is why it's so important. This is why it's such a big deal. Permanent slavery. Permanent slavery. Slavery was never permanent. This is why it's the most important of the slave codes. Slavery went from this kind of vague, quasi-indentured servitude to a permanent slavery. So the children of slaves, of female slaves, are slaves. And their children are slaves. And so on, and so on, and so on. It doesn't matter who their father is. All that matters is, if their mother's a slave, they're a slave. Period. It's permanent. And it goes on and on and on. Indentured servants will be free someday. And that's an important thing to think about. Who still had rights? Indentured servants are slaves, aren't they? But eventually they'll have rights. Eventually. And why they did that is such a big deal. This is a little cartoon, a little silly, but says lowly farmers simply do not know their place. Time to bring in the slaves. And that's the way we control them. And now you just divided, haven't they? There's now a difference in the lower class between slaves, because that's permanent, and indentured servants. Because someday they'll be free. That's huge. Why are they free? Well, a couple things. European descent, free one day. They have rights. Slaves, which more and more are becoming African slaves. Remember malaria? They're never free. they're never free. They never have rights. I should add, if it went the other way, and the slave was a male and the free person was female, that slave would be murdered, would be tortured to death. Not even a question. Just done. Gone. You probably, torture to death is called lynching. Usually, when people think about it, they think of hanging, but it's really torturing somebody to death. And that was one of the big things why people were tortured. But back to this. So they never have rights. And more, it went from Europeans, and they have a contract to color of skin. That's a difference. Lighter colored skin, they're free. They have rights. Darker colored skin, they never have rights. Why? Well, the complexity about citizenship and who was enslaved and all that went away to what an easy way to differentiate people. Color of skin. Darker the color, they must be slaves. And why are they slaves? Yeah.
So why would they kill the baby of the female master?
Oh, not the baby.
Oh, the slave?
The slave.
Oh,
Yeah, as a warning.
okay.
Yeah. A little bit later on, when slaves became really valuable during the Industrial Revolution, it'd be things like cut off a foot or castration or something like that. And they created a new concept out of this, out of the slave codes, called race. A way to divide people up. And once you get this, you can start getting equality. If they have rights, they must be better, right? There must be something better. There must be something inferior. What's coming out of this? Oops. And that's racism. We're coming to racism. And racism was created because of slavery. Racism was created due to colonization. Because think about how Europeans think they could justify this conquering other places. We have lighter skin, so we're better, we're superior, we should be on top. You're like little children. But it's important to understand this about racism. Racism is significantly more than just prejudice or being racist. In fact, I'm going to put up a definition of racism, and this is actually racist. And you could paraphrase this or whatever, but read that. Isn't that, when you think of racism, isn't that kind of what you think it is? Well, it's much more than that. Okay, this concept that there's something about one race that must make them better. Or at least people within it believe it. And this is corrosive, usually based upon ignorance and fear, but it's much more complex. Because as corrosive as that is, that's not what racism really is. Racism came out of Bacon's rebellion. It came out of making sure that the lower classes don't rebel. That's racism. It's power. And using the power of laws, like Bacon's rebellion, slave codes, fornication laws, after the civil, did I say fornication load? Fornication laws. Jim Crow laws after the Civil War, not allowing blacks to vote. In the United States, my grandfather's closet, other ones all the way up to the 1965. Or using economic conditions. Or just cultural norms, how people treat each other. Or, for that matter, just racial epithets. Calling somebody a name. When I don't have that name, it's a way to keep power. And it's corrosive. It's more than just an attitude. It's more than a feeling. And so as the United States this summer, most of you know, especially outside in a much more heterogeneous place like a place with big cities than Montana, you know, the United States is going through kind of a racial awakening, so to speak, about what racism is. It's like, again, dealing with this issue that started in the 17th century. And sometimes people say, well, we just need to listen to each other and understand and come together. Oh, sure. Yeah, that's good. But when it's about power, its tentacles go everywhere. It's customs and laws, and you just can't simply change those by simply saying, oh, I guess we're all equal now. And we're all friends, and let's have a group hug. Of course, we can't now. A group hug 6 feet apart. And so with that, I mean, think of it this way. Are you really ever equal if you just simply announce it? Are you equal to me? If we say, hey, let's go take a test on American history, and we all get to take the same test, we're all perfectly equal and take the same test right this moment. Are we equal? I'm not smarter than you, but I know a lot more than you, right? I do. That's my job. But I must be better than you because I'll do better on the test, right? Huh?
You just learned it so much.
But we're equal. We'll take the same test. See?
Yeah.
We take the same test, aren't we equal? It doesn't quite work by just simply announcing it. All right. On that happy note, you're going to take it. We'll take that test tomorrow. I have one little bit of homework I forgot to give you. Don't get mad at me. Well, you can. I put it on Teams. Did everyone see on Teams I assigned chapter 3 to read? Yeah. Did everyone get, there's a list of just terms that I might use on a quiz? Do you want the list? Yes. There's just a few terms. This actually asks for chapters 3, 4, and 5.
So that's what the football kids will be missing, is a test?
I might do a quiz. I think I wasn't doing class. I'm thinking more and more. Maybe I have to do it online. What would you guys rather do? I hate doing them online. If I do them online, it's a time limit. Like 5 minutes. It's coming. He knows how to. I know it's
We good to go.
Yeah, so
I'll give you a rule for my next class.
You have a lot bigger house than you do then.
Yup, first floor. And
Lots of one-on-one time.
trading might go remote only, so there might just be 3 of us. We'll see. Oh, no, trading did not go remote only.
Sure, yeah.
They told me to do this class.
Yeah.
So if I can do it, they can help me with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
ask them questions.
If you fall behind, just let me know.
I went and talked to you that I was going to be gone for the
Oh.
country, so that test.
The quiz, I'm just going to put it on.
Okay.
And what I'll do, it'll be just like a quiz. It'll be like 5 or 6 questions. Of course you will. And I'll put like a time limit of 5 minutes.
Okay.
And it'll be really basic. So, I'm going to look for another class.
I was just looking at you.
That'd be
Same thing I'm saying.
Okay, sounds good.
But these A day, B day things are really mess up.
And so this quiz, it will be on what we just did, or?
No, it's going to be on the read.
The reading, so
Yeah.
what we did this last time.
All right. It's so good to see most of you. I know, there's only 4 of us.